Welcome back, Canisius High School community. It's Andy Deyell, Vice President for Institutional Advancement, with another episode of Conversations with Canisius, our regular web series where we visit with alums from all over the U.S. and here in Buffalo, and we catch up on what they've been up to since their time at 1180 Delaware Avenue. I'm joined today by Mike Mineo. He is the Chief Medical Officer of DeGraff Medical Park and Millard Fillmore Suburban Hospitals. He's also a graduate of the class of 1996. Mike, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Andy. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for joining us and thanks for being a part of this. We're going to jump right in. Mike, you graduated in 1996. That's a bunch of years ago. Tell us a little bit about not only how you got to Canisius High School, but what you've been up to. Take us along your career path, your education since you left.
So I had a second cousin who went to Canisius High School, and he convinced my mom that this was the best pathway for us to go. So my parents sent my older brother there, and you just kind of follow suit with your brother. So I ended up coming here as well, had a great time. And as I got to the end of my Canisius experience, it was time to explore colleges. I was never one to travel very far, and with the urging of Fathers Garaventa and Higgins, I went right down the road over to Canisius College. Had 4 great years there, and as I said, I was never one overly ambitious to travel. So when it came time for medical school, went right down the road to University of Buffalo School of Medicine. Did 4 years there, and at the conclusion of that, you may notice a recurrent theme. I was interviewing for residencies, interviewed all over the country, but turns out what I needed, I didn't have to go very far for. So I did 3 years of emergency medicine training at the University of Buffalo School of Medicine. I've been an emergency physician in this community for about 15 years. In the latter portion, I've transitioned a little bit more to the management side. I went and had my master's degree from Carnegie Mellon University, and now I function both as a clinician and as an administrator within Kaleida Health.
Wow. And so when you reflect back on your time at Canisius High School, what were some of the things that you learned there that prepared you for your role today?
I think the biggest thing I learned is that you could achieve whatever you want. I grew up in Lancaster, which is a relatively small town. My mom's a nurse, my dad was an auto worker, but within Canisius, I was exposed to the parents of my friends from diverse backgrounds, and we're all over the place. And that's where I kind of learned that if you wanted to be a physician, you could be a physician. Up to that point, it seemed such an abstract idea. Within my family, there weren't a lot within professional school, but I saw this and it actually normalized this, what I thought was a degree of success, that you could achieve what you want. And so it became less abstract and more achievable.
Wow. And so, Canisius, it's not just about academics, obviously, the Ignatian component and then the Ignatian spirituality that we sort of engage in at Canisius High School is a huge part of our education. Talk a little bit about that and maybe how that Ignatian spirituality is present in your life today.
I think it's most impacts me in action. So it's not necessarily giving thank to God in all that I do, but just seeing God's work in other people. One example I'm seeing right now is I'm helping lead the rollout of the COVID vaccine. And what we realize is there's really healthcare disparities in that, and that not everybody within the hospital environment who's at risk sits in front of a computer, that there are other people who need the vaccine, that need to be protected, that don't necessarily have the voice. They're not fighting for themselves. And recognizing that's our obligation to fight for those who don't have a voice.
As a first, it's a really interesting point. And as a first responder to the pandemic, can you just give me a little insight into what the last 12 months, 9 months has been like? What have been some of the greatest challenges in your industry and just overall in society, do you think?
I think it's a couple. I think that there's how do we keep the community safe? So how do you make sure that you're doing public messaging so that they understand the most important thing they can do is not get sick? Right. And then the second part is, if they get sick, how do you get them better? What is the clinical care? How do you build care protocols? Third part is, how do you have capacity for them? You've all seen these pictures of overloaded ICUs in emergency departments. What you can do so that when people are here, that they can actually get the beds that they need. Beyond that operational standpoint, you have to look at, what do you do for morale? This has now been going on for about a year. People are tired. So you're looking into the eyes of your nurses and they're exhausted. They don't want any more overtime. They don't want to be away from their family. And same with the physicians. And How do you keep them engaged, keep them focused, and keep them happy to come for work? Because when you're happy at work, you actually do a better job. The unspoken aspect of that is, how do you support all of that? Our healthcare system is devised on an idea that you do surgery support the mission. You really can't do surgeries now, but you still have, not only do you have the mission, but you have a very expensive mission because of the cost of testing, the cost of vaccine rollouts, the cost of PPE, none of which is reimbursed anywhere within this equation.
Wow. So, as you know, ideally, we think a lot of our, we'd like a lot of our students, young alums, our whole alumni base really to watch these videos and to, catch up with our alums. But what about some advice? When you think about young people today, when you think about some of these high school kids, I mean, you were there not too long ago. As they're about to make their way out into the wider world, into college, into their careers, what advice would you give young people today?
I'd probably give two big advice. I think the first one is determine what you want to do and stop at nothing till you get there. So if you get a bad score on an exam, that just means you have to work harder on the next one. Don't take excuses. You know that you're capable of achieving it. You were able to get through a very rigorous high school program. That means that you set your own limits. The other part is to be a man for others. If you're just chasing financial reimbursement, if you're just chasing some sort of gratification elsewhere, you're never going to be happy. But if you're really doing the work for others and make sure you're taking care of your community, that you're advocating for your patients, that you're advocating for your staff, that way you'll always be fulfilled.
Now, looking forward into 2021, a lot of us are glad that 2020 is over. And as we look forward into the future, the near future, and the not too distant future, tell us what's on the horizon for Mike Mineo. What are you working on? What kind of plans do you have?
I think there's a couple ways I'm going to look at it. I think number one, professionally. I think professionally is helping get this community through the COVID-19 crisis and help the healthcare systems recover after we get through the crisis. I think the other part is that when you become so focused on work, recognize the other parts that are important, meaning the family, and making sure that I'm spending enough time with my family, to thank them for supporting me while I was trying to do my job.
Yeah. This is great. Thanks for joining us today, Mike. This is just a quick little snapshot of what you've been up to, and clearly it's been a lot. And I want to thank you personally for your service during the last year. I know it's been a really hard time for a lot of our first responders, but thanks for joining us today, and thanks for all you do.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to joining 1180 Delaware again soon.
We'll see you very soon, Mike. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you.
Bye.